Finally. It's taken me almost half a decade, but I finally have a Reverso here to share with you on the Bruce Williams channel. This is the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso Classic Duoface Small Seconds. This exact execution here, I believe, is one of the more desirable modern Reversos on the current market. I know I've talked to several of you. This is your favorite Reverso, and it's not hard to see why. There is a lot to enjoy here with this particular Art Deco execution. Let's take a look at the details, and then we'll go into dimensions, we'll go into history, we'll go into the positives, we'll go into the negatives. I hope you enjoy this presentation, and let me know if you have any specific questions. I'd be happy to try to answer that, so place those in the comments section. But let's start taking a look at the light side, the silver side, the opaline side of this Duoface. Essentially, you have two watches in one, and I love the details displayed here. It's very classic and very sophisticated in the execution. We have a vertically brushed, linear, slightly reflective silver dial with printed Arabic markers done and a slightly reflective black finish. And I think that looks very sharp. Subset of that, you guys can see a highly texturized hobnail pattern. It's quite uneven in the undulation there, so it's impressive to see Jaeger-LeCoultre printed so crisply on such an uneven surface. You guys will notice thermally blued hands, a subsidiary seconds on the bottom portion of the dial, and this is my favorite thing. We have the perfect repetition of the golden ratio of perfect proportion. So this is just a ratio that we find in nature, and it's presented here on this Art Deco design. And notice how if we start on the outside edge, we have this texturing, almost this stippling found on the perimeter. And then subset of the vertically brushed elements, we have the indexing, the hobnail, and then subset of that, we have the subsidiary seconds, and then subset of that, we have some additional texturing. It's just this perfect linear progression of angles, and I just love that. The detail work is very, very sharp. Now, if we reverse the feature here, if we flip the watch on the other face of this Duoface, you guys can see a completely opposite execution. Instead of silver, we have dark. Instead of brushing and hobnail, we have matte or a flat section in the center, and then we have a clou de Paris texture. Instead of a subsidiary seconds, we have a 24-hour display. And notice there is some different texturing found on that portion of the dial on this side. We don't have Arabics on this side. We have applied markers with lume. We don't have blued hands. We have polished hands. And so again, there's this great dichotomy of light and dark in this reversing Art Deco design. And I just find that so compelling. So, you know, if you want to wear the traditional light side, you can do that. If you want to flip it over and match a different suit or whatever you're wearing that day, you can flip it over and really have two watches in one. And this is great if you travel. It's also great if you don't travel and you just want to take, account of a secondary time zone. You're able to do that very easily. So let me demonstrate that. Let's take a look at the crown. It's either going to be at the 3 o'clock or the 9 o'clock, depending on which dial is in prominence. But this is a non-screw down crown. This has a very pleasant winding action, and you pop it out to the only position, and you'll notice there is no hacking with this 854A-2 movement. And that might be surprising to you, especially if you're new into horology and you haven't experienced any high horology products. It's actually pretty common on the higher horology complications or movements not to have hacking. This does not have hacking, but you can adjust the time. And notice as I do that, both sides, both faces of this Duoface move in synchronization. And so I can set the time to my local time zone. And then if I want to bump the hour, I don't do it through the crown. Now, traditionally, there's been an external button, a pusher, that you operate to bump the hour on the travel time side, on the dark side, but that's not present here. And I like that. I think the hidden feature is a little bit more sophisticated. It's a little bit more fun, but you access that on the top part of the reversing case. You'll notice flush here is this button that you slide to one side. And anytime you slide it, you bump the hour hand on the travel time side forward by 1 hour intervals. It also bumps the needle hand, the polished needle hand on the 24-hour display so you guys can keep track of which portion of day or night the time is reading. And I find that fascinating. I think this is very impressive. I know it doesn't have hacking, but take a look. 2 watches in one with a travel time that you can adjust on the fly without taking the watch off while the watch is still running, and it all comes in under 10.5 millimeters in height. I find that impressive. I think that is really sharp. Again, this is the watchmaker's watchmaker, the coolest slogan out of any watch brand. I think this is very impressive. So let's talk briefly about the movement. This again is called the 854A-2 caliber from Jaeger-LeCoultre, 160 components, 21,600 beats per hour, one single barrel that holds 42 hours of power reserve, and then we have 19 joules here within this movement. So admittedly, the power reserve is rather pedestrian, and I hope JLC is able to increase that in future iterations of the Duoface, because 42 hours, that used to be the norm, but these days I think 50 hours is really the minimum, and we're getting used to 60, 65, 70, 80 hours in some instances. And so I hope the power reserve can be increased in future generations. I think that is really one of the only negative elements, but again, if we're nitpicking how many hours you have before you have to wind the watch and interact with your lovely timepiece, I think this is a pretty great overall package. So let's talk about the history. I think that's very important as you consider a watch as iconic as the Reverso. The first Reverso debuted in 1931, and 3 years later in 1934, the first subsidiary seconds debuted, which is very similar to the light side of this specific Duoface. Now officially, Jaeger and LeCoultre merged in 1937. So there was a period of 6 years where the Reverso was produced in with a number of different entities involved in the production, predominantly Jaeger and LeCoultre. But it's cool, you could find a Reverso pre-official JLC. And this is what I find fascinating. It really has nothing to do with a specific Duoface. But between 1931 and 1932, there were some Reverso cases sold to Patek Philippe, and they produced 8 different Patek Philippe Reversos. And I don't think you'll ever find one come to auction, but technically, you could buy an official Patek Philippe Reverso, and it would be a true, authentic, non-homage Reverso. And again, I find that fascinating. That history is really cool. Now, unfortunately, JLC did not produce the Reverso uninterrupted from its inception until now. They did revive the Reverso in 1982. So technically, most of the Reversos on the market today have been produced within that time period of roughly 35 to almost 40 years. And the nice thing is there is a host of different sizes, different colors, different complications, different materials. There should be a flavor of the Reverso for everyone. And I know this Duoface small seconds with the large size, this is one of the more popular ones. And again, for good reason, this is an excellent complication. And it comes in thin, it comes in trim. I really do enjoy it. But let me tell you what my favorite Reverso is. It was one that came out almost a decade ago in 2011, the 80th year anniversary of the original Reverso. It's called the Tribute to 1931. And it's a very faithful modern recreation of the original Reverso from 1931. And I think it's lovely. I think it's perfection. If it had a bracelet that was compatible, to me, that would be the cat's pajamas as far as Reversos go. And part of me is torn. Should I go out and try to source one? Because they're climbing up in value. They're getting harder to find, fewer and further between for nice examples. Or do I wait? Do I wait another decade and see what JLC does with the 100th anniversary of the original watch? Will they do something similar to the Tribute to 1931? Or will they, do something crazy in complication that's completely different? I don't know. So I just want to share my favorite Reverso is that Tribute to 1931. And I'd like to hear what your favorite Reverso is over the decades, please put that in the comment section. But overall, this is a very strong release, lovely Art Deco design, excellent history, detail work. I love the slightly curved case here. I love the engine turning found on the bottom portion of the case, underneath the reversing center section. I love the fact that, again, the golden ratio of perfect proportion is displayed here in this iconic watch. I think it would be great to get a Reverso, perhaps that tribute to 1931, and pair it with my tank from Cartier. That would be a great rectangular collection of iconic historic watches, and that's something that I'm personally considering. Now, just in closing, let's talk about negative elements of the watch. I don't want to come across as just hyping up any specific model, even ones as awesome as this Reverso from Jaeger-LeCoultre. I think with this one, there are a couple things that bother me, but I can live with them. Let me just share what those are on the light side, and I guess also on the dark side of the Duoface. Between the minutes of 25 and 35, you guys will see the index track is broken up. And so if you're trying to read the time precisely or perhaps set the time perfectly, you're going to have to guess a little bit. Again, something you're going to have to live with. It's not a huge deal, but it might be significant to you. I feel it's, at least worth mentioning. And then the other thing, I would like to see an excellent application of anti-reflective treatment so I can see the lovely dial details on both sides of the Duoface to a higher degree of clarity and crispness. I think that would be really welcome. And then the only other thing, and I almost hesitate to mention it because I think some of you will take it too far. You'll start overreacting that Jaeger-LeCoultre is ripping off their customers. They're doing a bad job. They're not. But look on the dark side of this watch. You guys can see some quality control issues on a macro level. Some of the printing of the railroad track is a little uneven. There is, again, some blemish there. And then notice the polished hour hand here. You can see some, wear marks, scratches. There is some imperfections in that as well. And that just goes to show that any brand, doesn't matter if it's Seiko, Casio, Rolex, or Jaeger-LeCoultre, it doesn't matter. Any brand will have small issues from time to time, and it's not the end of the world. But I just wanted to point that out. I hope you guys have enjoyed the presentation. Please let me know what your favorite Reverso is, and if you have any specific questions. I want to thank my friend Greg, who is just an awesome friend of mine here in Utah. Amazing collection. We have very similar watch tastes, and I'm going to put his Instagram, Future Rust and Dust, in the description of the video, and I hope you guys give him a follow. He's got an awesome collection, again, anywhere from Casio and G-Shock, Seiko, to Rolex, to Glashütte and Norqain, Patek Philippe, Vacheron Constantin. He's got some really great watches, so his Instagram is in the description of the video. Thank you, Greg. Thank you guys for watching. Again, reach out with questions. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.